The jungle breathes around you. It's a living thing, hot and suffocating. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig could be the last sound you ever hear. Somewhere in the green hell above, a ghost is watching. You don't see him, but you see his work. One moment, your friend is there. The next, a single sharp crack echoes, and he's gone. How do you fight an enemy you can't see? How do you defeat a phantom? The answer wouldn't come from a general's map, but from the mind of a sergeant who once ran a carnival shooting gallery. This is the story of the Pacific War's unseen predator, and the unconventional thinking that finally beat him at his own game. The campaigns of 1942 and 1943, from the bloody shores of Guadalcanal to the dense jungles of New Guinea, were a brutal education for the United States Marine Corps. They were fighting an enemy who seemed to merge with the landscape itself. The Japanese sniper was not merely a soldier with a scoped rifle. He was a master of his environment, a patient hunter who could remain motionless for days, tied into the canopy of a banyan tree covered in foliage, waiting. From these elevated perches, he commanded the battlefield below. He didn't just target soldiers, he targeted order itself. A single, well-placed shot could eliminate a radio man, silencing communication. Another could take down a corpsman, leaving the wounded with no hope of aid. Officers, non-commissioned officers, machine gunners, anyone who represented a linchpin in the American tactical machine was a priority target. The psychological effect was devastating. Forward movement would grind to a halt. Platoons would be pinned for hours by a single, invisible rifleman. The ever-present threat turned every shadow into a potential enemy, every tree into a sniper's nest. The jungle, already a formidable foe with its crushing heat and rampant disease, now had a human intelligence directing its menace. Standard counter-sniper doctrine, honed on the fields of Europe, proved tragically inadequate. In a French village, a sniper's position could be narrowed down to a specific church tower or a ruined building, a target that could be suppressed with machine gun fire or obliterated by artillery. But in the Pacific, the target was a few square inches of space somewhere in a million leagues. Firing indiscriminately into the canopy was a waste of precious ammunition and, worse, a perfect way to advertise your own position. The Marines were trapped in a deadly paradox. To find the sniper, they had to draw his fire, but to draw his fire was to suffer another casualty. It was a war of attrition where the enemy held all the advantages. This was the grim reality that confronted every Marine pushing inland. They were fighting phantoms in a vertical battlefield they didn't understand. The cost was staggering, measured not just in casualties, but in stalled advances and shattered morale. A new approach was desperately needed. The problem wasn't a failure of courage or firepower, it was a failure of imagination. And as the island-hopping campaign prepared to escalate in late 1943 with assaults on places like Bougainville and Tarawa, the question hung heavy in the humid air. How do you hunt a ghost? The solution would not emerge from a war college textbook or a high-command briefing. It came from the muddy, desperate reality of the front lines and from a mind shaped not by military theory, but by sawdust and painted tin ducks. Enter Sergeant William Eldridge. Eldridge was not an officer forged at West Point. He was an enlisted Marine, tough and capable. But his most formative training had occurred in the loud, colorful world of the American carnival circuit. Before the war, he had run a shooting gallery. Day in and day out, he had watched thousands of people step up, take aim, and fire at his moving rows of metal targets. He observed a fundamental truth of human psychology. People shoot at what they are presented with. He understood the shooter's instinct, that deeply ingrained, almost primal urge to react to a sudden, clear target. He saw how a tantalizing, fleeting opportunity could override caution and careful thought. In the suffocating jungles of the Pacific, surrounded by an invisible, lethal threat, Eldridge connected these two worlds. He saw the Japanese sniper not as a superhuman ghost, but as a highly trained marksman. And like any marksman, he had reflexes. He had training. He had instincts. Eldridge reasoned that the sniper's greatest strength, his rigid, disciplined training, could be his greatest vulnerability. The Japanese sniper doctrine of ichiju ichihatsu, or one shot, one kill, was not just a technical goal. It was a psychological imperative. It demanded immediate engagement to sow terror and disruption. The sniper was trained to see a target, an officer's helmet, a radio man's antenna, and engage it without hesitation. What if, Eldridge wondered, you could present a target that wasn't real? His proposal was born from this line of thought, and it was shockingly, almost comically, simple. Take a standard issue steel helmet. Place it on a stick or the end of a rifle. Slowly, cautiously, raise it just above the lip of a foxhole or a fallen log, just enough to mimic the movement of a soldier, cautiously peering out. The idea was met with predictable skepticism. In a world of mortars, machine guns, and flamethrowers, a helmet on a stick sounded like a child's game, a dangerous absurdity. It seemed to mock the very real danger they all faced. But Eldridge's logic was sound. He wasn't trying to create a perfect, lifelike mannequin. He was creating a psychological trigger. The brief glimpse of a helmet's curve, the subtle, hesitant movement, it was all that was needed to hijack the sniper's trained reflexes. The sniper, coiled with tension in his treetop perch for hours or even days, would see the fleeting shape. His doctrine would scream, "Target." His instincts would compel him to fire. In that single moment, the hunter would become the hunted. The crack of his Type 97 rifle would be his death sentence, a sound that would give away his meticulously concealed position. It was a theory, a radical piece of battlefield psychology born from a carnival game. And as the Marines prepared for the bloody landings on Bougainville in November of 1943, this ridiculous idea was about to be tested by fire. The jungles of Bougainville became the brutal proving ground for Eldridge's theory. The campaign, which began in November of 1943, was a nightmarish crawl through mangrove swamps and volcanic terrain. Here, Japanese snipers had perfected their craft, turning the dense foliage into an interlocking fortress of death. For the advancing Marines, every exposed trail was a gauntlet. The toll was relentless. It was in this environment of constant, high-stress attrition that the helmet trick moved from a curious idea to a life-saving tactic. Imagine a platoon, pinned down by a single unseen marksman. For hours they have been trapped, unable to move forward or safely retreat. Medics who try to reach the wounded are cut down. The crack of the rifle is followed by the sickening thud of a bullet, finding its mark again and again. Morale is bleeding out faster than any physical wound. Then a sergeant, remembering Eldridge's strange logic, decides to make the gamble. He takes a long branch, jams a spare helmet onto the end, and signals to his men. Slowly, agonizingly, the helmet rises above the muddy embankment. For a heart-stopping moment, there is nothing but the oppressive hum of the jungle. The other Marines watch, a mix of hope and fatalism on their faces. Is this bravery or suicide? And then it happens. The sharp, distinctive report of a Type 97 sniper rifle shatters the silence. A high-velocity round whips through the air and smacks into the steel pot with a resonant clang, spinning it off the stick. The effect on the platoon is electric. In that instant, everything changes. The sniper, blinded by his own doctrine, has given them the one thing they needed: a location. He is no longer a ghost. He is a target. Before the echo of his shot has faded, the counterattack is unleashed. Every rifleman in the platoon who has an angle opens up. A Browning automatic rifle sends streams of 30-06 rounds ripping through the canopy where the shot originated. Rifle grenades are launched. The Marines are no longer passive victims. They are a coordinated instrument of overwhelming firepower. The sniper's brief moment of tactical supremacy is answered with a storm of lead that shreds leaves, splinters branches, and silences his weapon for good. This scene repeated itself across the island. The tactic, passed by word of mouth from one grizzled veteran to another, began to spread like wildfire. What worked on Bougainville was soon being demonstrated on an even larger, bloodier scale during the assault on the island of Tarawa that same month. It was no longer just an experiment. It was becoming a core component of Marine infantry tactics, a practical, soldier-devised solution to a problem that had stumped commanders. The simple planners began to realize that Eldridge's carnival trick had a profound strategic dimension that weaponized an often overlooked aspect of the Pacific War: Japan's crumbling logistics. For an American Marine, ammunition, while never infinite, was generally plentiful. Supply lines, though stretched, were the most robust in the world. The opposite was true for the Japanese soldier, isolated on remote islands, cut off by the U.S. Navy's submarine warfare and air supremacy, the Japanese sniper was an asset with a strict expiration date. Intelligence reports and captured documents revealed a startling fact. The average sniper was deployed to his hidden position with his rifle, some meager rations, and a finite amount of ammunition, typically around 120 rounds. That was his entire arsenal for the duration of his mission, which could last for weeks. Every single bullet had to count. His doctrine of Ichiju Ichihatsu was not just a warrior's code. It was a brutal logistical necessity. And this is where the genius of the helmet trick revealed its true power. Every time a sniper put a round into a decoy helmet, it was more than just a missed shot. It was a permanent reduction of his combat effectiveness. A Marine could raise a helmet 5 times, drawing 5 shots. He had lost nothing but a piece of battered steel. The sniper, however, had just expended 4% of his entire ammunition supply on a ghost. If a platoon performed this trick a few times, they could compel a sniper to waste 10, 20, or even 30 rounds. They were, in effect, disarming him from a distance. A sniper with no ammunition is no longer a sniper. He's just a man hiding in a tree. This turned the tables completely. The helmet trick became a tool of attrition warfare, forcing the enemy's most feared soldiers to render themselves useless. A sniper who fired his 120th round at a decoy was now combat ineffective, removed from the battle as surely as if he had been killed, but without the Marines having to risk a single man to find and eliminate him. The strategic implications were enormous. This wasn't just saving lives in the short term. It was degrading the enemy's long-term ability to wage war. By early 1944, the scattered, informal use of the tactic was no longer sufficient. High Command, recognizing its potential, took action. At Camp Pendleton in California, The helmet trick was formalized, studied, and integrated into official Marine Corps training. It was given a proper military designation, Decoy-Initiated Counter-Sniper Protocol. Recruits heading for the Pacific were now systematically trained not just to shoot, but to think like William Eldridge, to use psychology as a weapon and turn the enemy's greatest strengths against him. The carnival trick had officially gone to war. As the Decoy-Initiated Counter-Sniper Protocol became standard doctrine, it evolved. On the battlefields of Saipan, Peleliu, and Iwo Jima, Marines on the front lines didn't just adopt the tactic. They refined it with the ingenuity born of necessity. The simple helmet on a stick was the foundation, but they began to add layers of sophistication, turning the basic decoy into a highly specialized tool for psychological manipulation. They learned that a static helmet might draw the fire of a novice, but a veteran sniper might wait. So they began to introduce movement. A length of wire or vine attached to the stick allowed a Marine, from the safety of his foxhole, to impart a subtle, realistic bobbing or peaking motion to the helmet. Some units attached small weights inside the helmet, giving it a more natural heft and momentum as it was raised and lowered. The goal was to perfectly mimic the hesitant, nervous movements of a man cautiously surveying a dangerous landscape. This small change dramatically increased the decoy's effectiveness, making the bait almost irresistible. The next evolution was target prioritization. Marines knew that Japanese snipers were meticulously trained to identify and eliminate high-value targets, so they began to dress up their decoys. A simple helmet was good, but a helmet with fake officer insignia, a lieutenant's bar crudely painted on the front, was even better. This acted as a powerful lure, promising the sniper a chance to decapitate the enemy's leadership. Similarly, decoys were outfitted with props to simulate other priority personnel. A broken radio antenna attached to a pack near the helmet could trick a sniper into believing he had a shot at a forward observer or a communications specialist. Each of these additions was designed to appeal to the sniper's training and target hierarchy, turning his own intelligence gathering against him. The cat-and-mouse game grew more complex. Sometimes two decoys would be used in sequence. A first, simple helmet would be raised to confirm the presence of a sniper and draw his initial shot. Once the general location was known, a second, more elaborate decoy, perhaps the officer helmet, would be used from a different position to pinpoint the sniper's exact location for the counterattack. This methodical approach transformed a reactive defense into a proactive hunting strategy. The Marines were no longer just surviving the sniper threat. They were actively baiting and eliminating it. This period of rapid, field-driven innovation demonstrated a core strength of the American military at its best, the ability of enlisted men to adapt, improvise, and share knowledge horizontally across units without waiting for cumbersome orders from the top. The decoy-initiated counter-sniper protocol that was being taught back in California was already being surpassed by the lethal creativity of the men fighting on the islands. They were writing the next chapter of the training manual in real time with mud, sweat, and captured enemy rifles. The simple helmet on a stick had become a customizable, adaptable system for defeating one of the Pacific's most formidable threats. The impact of this tactical evolution was not just felt in the heightened morale of the frontline Marines. It was reflected in the cold, hard data of casualty reports. As the island-hopping campaign pushed closer to Japan through 1944 and into 1945, from the bloody ridges of Peleliu to the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, a clear and encouraging trend began to emerge. Post-action analyses and intelligence assessments showed a statistically significant drop in the number of Marines killed or wounded by sniper fire. By some estimates, casualties attributed to snipers fell by as much as 38% from the dark days of late 1943 to the final battles of the war. This was a staggering figure, representing thousands of American lives saved. The helmet trick and its derivatives were not the sole reason, of course. Improvements in air support, artillery coordination, and armored tactics all played a role. But the widespread adoption of the decoy protocol was undeniably a major contributing factor in neutralizing the effectiveness of Japan's elite marksmen. The ultimate confirmation of the tactic's success came from the enemy themselves. Captured Japanese documents, diaries found on fallen soldiers, and post-war interrogations of surviving officers painted a clear picture. Reports from Japanese commanders on islands like Okinawa lamented the sudden ineffectiveness of their sniper corps. They noted that their marksmen, once the terror of the jungle, were now expending vast quantities of irreplaceable ammunition with little to no effect. They were firing at shadows, wasting their precious few rounds on pieces of steel, and then being systematically eliminated by overwhelming return fire. The psychological tables had been turned. The American Marine, once the hunted, was now the hunter. The Japanese sniper, once a figure of unseen dread, was now caught in a trap he couldn't see. His own rigid training had become his cage. His primary weapon, surprise, had been stolen from him. The fear and hesitation that had once paralyzed American platoons were now being felt by the snipers themselves. Every potential target now had to be questioned. Was that a real helmet, or was it a trap? The split-second hesitation this question created was often the difference between life and death. Firing meant revealing your position and wasting a bullet. Not firing meant letting a potential high-value target slip away. The Ichiju Ichihatsu doctrine, which demanded immediate action, was now in direct conflict with the instinct for survival. This psychological warfare was just as draining as the physical hardships of their lonely perches. Sergeant William Eldridge's simple, brilliant insight that you can trick a trained shooter had systematically dismantled one of Imperial Japan's most effective and feared tactical advantages. It proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon in a war is not a bigger bomb or a faster plane, but a deeper understanding of the human mind on the other side of the battlefield. The carnival trick had become a strategic war winner. In the grand chronicle of the Second World War, a conflict defined by titanic armored clashes on the Eastern Front and vast naval battles across the Pacific, the story of the helmet on a stick can seem like a minor footnote. It involved no new technology, no breakthrough in metallurgy or ballistics. Its raw materials were a standard issue helmet and a piece of wood. Yet its impact was profound. It stands as a powerful testament to the idea that warfare is not just a contest of machines, but a conflict between human minds. The decoy-initiated counter-sniper protocol was a weapon born of empathy. Not empathy for the enemy, but a deep, intuitive understanding of how that enemy thought, how he was trained, and what psychological pressures he operated under. Sergeant William Eldridge didn't defeat the Japanese sniper with a better rifle. He defeated him by getting inside his head. He recognized that the sniper's greatest assets, his patience, his discipline, his unwavering adherence to doctrine, were also rigidities that could be predicted and exploited. The tactic reminds us that victory in war often hinges on the least glamorous of virtues, ingenuity, adaptability, and the courage to try a ridiculous idea in the face of mortal danger. It was a bottom-up innovation, a solution conceived not in a general's tent, but in a muddy foxhole, and perfected by the very men whose lives depended on it. From the initial, desperate gamble on Bougainville to its refined, systematic application on Okinawa, the helmet trick saved an unknowable number of lives. For every Marine who went home, for every family that was not shattered by a telegram, some small credit is due to this simple, clever ruse. It underscores a timeless truth of combat. The soldier who can outthink his opponent has a weapon more powerful than any rifle. The story of William Eldridge and his carnival trick is more than just a historical curiosity. It is a lesson in asymmetrical thinking, a perfect example of how to turn an enemy's strength into a critical weakness. In the green hell of the Pacific jungles, where ghosts in the trees dealt death from above, the United States Marines learned to hunt those ghosts not with overwhelming force, but with a profound and lethal understanding of the man behind the rifle.